So just a few years ago, 40% of adults in the world had never heard of climate change. And
I decided to read more about climate change in Iran, and I became increasingly alarmed. From what I could see, there was a severe lack of climate resources available in Farsi, Iran's native language.
I became an advocate for climate education, and I worked to translate climate resources so I could teach my relatives about what I had learned in school.
She was just 15 when she realized something that world leaders had missed for decades. By 18, she was advising the United Nations. At 20, Forbes named her one of the most influential people on the planet. And she did it all by asking one simple question: why can't my grandmother understand the climate crisis? This is the story of Sophia Kianni, the Gen Z activist who turned language into the world's most powerful climate weapon. Please subscribe and turn on notification bell so you'll be notified anytime we drop a new video. Let's go.
Now, I was still determined to educate my relatives. So I decided to work with my mom to translate climate resources into Farsi, so I could teach my aunts and uncles about how climate change-induced disasters were impacting millions of Iranians.
Tehran, Iran, early 2000s. Before Sophia Kianni became a voice for millions, she was a child caught between two worlds. Born to Iranian parents, Sophia spent her early years visiting family in Iran, a country where the impacts of climate change weren't just statistics on a graph. They were the dust storms that choked the streets, the water shortages that plagued neighborhoods, the unbearable heat waves that made summers nearly unlivable. But here's the thing that changed everything. When Sophia tried to explain the climate crisis to her relatives in Iran, her grandmother, her extended family, she hit a wall. Not because they didn't care, but because all the information about climate change, all the research, all the solutions, they were in English. Think about that for a second.
And so I brought up the like facts that I had found online, and I was like, I mean, look how horrible the air pollution is. Isn't this, like, what do you guys think about this? And when I was using these buzzwords like global warming and climate change, they were like, what are you talking about?
75% of the world's population doesn't speak English fluently. Yet nearly all climate information was locked away in a language most people couldn't access. For young Sophia, this wasn't just unfair. It was a crisis within a crisis. Growing up in McLean, Virginia, one of the wealthiest counties in America, Sophia attended excellent schools. She excelled academically, but something was gnawing at her. At 13, during another visit to Iran, young Sophia witnessed something that would cement her life's mission: the pollution, the environmental degradation, the climate denial that persisted simply because people didn't have access to information in their own language. Most teenagers would have felt helpless. Sophia got angry, and then she got to work. By 15, while most of her peers were worried about SATs and prom dates, Sophia was learning everything she could about climate science. She devoured reports from the IPCC. She studied translation technology. She taught herself about digital platforms and social media reach. But she was also still a kid, balancing homework, friends, and the normal chaos of high school life. The difference? She spent her weekends building what would become a global movement. 2019, Sophia was 16 years old when she founded Climate Cardinals. The concept was beautifully simple. Take climate information and translate it into every language possible. Make the climate crisis accessible to everyone, not just English speakers. But here's where Sophia's genius really showed. She didn't hire professional translators. She built a global network of youth volunteers, teenagers and young adults from around the world who were bilingual and passionate about climate action. It started small, a handful of volunteers, a few dozen translations, then exploded. Within 2 years, Climate Cardinals had mobilized over 8,000 volunteers across 41 countries. They translated climate information into over 100 languages, from Spanish and Mandarin to Swahili, Arabic, and indigenous languages that had been completely ignored by the mainstream climate movement. Suddenly, a grandmother in Tehran could read about climate solutions in Farsi. A farmer in rural Indonesia could access agricultural adaptation strategies in Bahasa. Sophia had democratized climate information, and the world was starting to notice.
I could be the youngest person in the room, and yet I can be more informed on these issues than others. So when I realized that, I felt like it was my responsibility to advocate for climate change, knowing that climate change is affecting my generation.
2020, as the world locked down during the pandemic, Sophia's influence was rising. At just 17, she became the youngest member of the United Nations Secretary-General's Youth Advisory Group on climate change. Let that sink in, 17 years old, advising Antonio Guterres alongside global youth leaders on one of humanity's greatest challenges. But Sophia wasn't content with just one role. She stacked achievements like someone collecting infinity stones. And then came the media blitz. Forbes 30 Under 30, the Time magazine article, NPR interviews, TED stages, BBC features. By 18, Sophia Kianni wasn't just famous, she was influential. Major news outlets called her one of the most important climate activists of her generation. She was being mentioned in the same breath as Greta Thunberg and Vanessa Nakate. But here's what made Sophia different. While others were striking and protesting, Sophia was building infrastructure, creating systems, solving the accessibility problem that everyone else had overlooked. Despite her growing fame, Sophia made a choice that surprised some people. She enrolled at Stanford University to study computer science. Think about the discipline that required. Most people with her level of influence would have gone all in on activism. Sophia chose education. She balanced coding classes and problem sets with UN meetings and media interviews. Why computer science? Because Sophia understood something crucial. The future of climate action would be digital, data-driven, technology-enabled. She wasn't just building a movement. She was building the tools for the next generation of climate solutions. And at Stanford, she refined those tools. Learned about AI and machine learning. Studied how technology could scale translations even further. Networked with Silicon Valley's brightest minds. All while running Climate Cardinals. All while advising international organizations. All while being a college student. So what has Climate Cardinals actually accomplished? The numbers are staggering. Over 8,000 youth translators, more than 100 languages, hundreds of thousands of words of climate information made accessible, documents from major climate organizations, the IPCC, UNICEF, various NGOs, all translated and distributed freely. But the real impact goes deeper than numbers. Somewhere in Bangladesh, a community is implementing flood resilience strategies they read about in Bengali. In Mexico, indigenous communities are accessing climate adaptation resources in their native languages for the first time. In the Philippines, young activists are organizing using materials translated by Climate Cardinals volunteers. Sophia didn't just translate words. She translated power. She gave voice to the voiceless. She armed communities with the information they needed to fight for their own futures.
It's so important to be translating climate information so that the people who are being worst affected by climate change have information so that they can learn about what's happening to them and they can learn about how we can combat this issue.
But Climate Cardinals isn't Sophia's only venture. Sophia understands that sustainable change requires sustainable organizations. Professional footage, speaking engagements. She's built Climate Cardinals as a registered nonprofit with a distributed team model. No expensive offices, no traditional hierarchy. Just a network of passionate volunteers coordinated through digital platforms. The organization has secured partnerships with major climate groups, educational institutions, and international bodies. It's become the go-to resource for climate translation services. Sophia has also become a sought-after speaker, lending her voice and expertise to conferences, panels, and events worldwide. She's monetized her influence not for personal gain, but to fund the movement she's building. Some critics have questioned whether volunteer-based translation is sustainable, whether the quality can match professional services, whether Sophia, now in her early 20s, has the experience to lead such a large operation. But the results speak for themselves. Climate Cardinals has successfully filled a gap that multi-million-dollar organizations ignored for
into
decades.
the world. I'm telling you this story because for me, it brings to life something that is essential about the climate and environmental movement. And that is that it often takes something, or more accurately, someone, to inspire our journey into activism. And for me, that was my mom.
For all of her public achievements, Sophia has managed to keep much of her personal life private, a rare feat for someone with her level of visibility. What we do know paints a picture of someone deeply committed to her values. She's spoken openly about the mental health challenges of youth activism, the burnout, the anxiety, the weight of fighting for the planet's future while still trying to figure out your own.
Of course, I also can't fail to mention that in Iran right now, there really is a human rights revolution that's happening, that's being led by young women.
Sophia has maintained her connection to her Iranian heritage. She's used her platform to highlight how climate change disproportionately affects countries like Iran, nations that contributed least to the crisis but suffer most from its consequences. And she's never forgotten that grandmother who couldn't access climate information in Farsi. In many ways, everything Sophia built was for her. Step back and look at what Sophia Kianni represents. She's part of a generation that's done something remarkable. They've taken the climate crisis personally, not abstractly, not as some distant problem for future generations to solve.
So thinking back to the moments when I would watch my mom gently water her prized apricot tree, it makes sense that she would have inspired me. The women who come before us inspire us to step up today. We need female leadership now more than ever. After all, we don't call it Mother Nature for nothing.
Sophia, alongside activists like Greta Thunberg, Vanessa Nakate, Shia Bastida, and countless others, has made climate action a moral imperative for young people worldwide. But Sophia's contribution is unique. While others have excelled at raising awareness and demanding action, Sophia built the infrastructure for global participation. She recognized that the climate movement had a language problem, and she fixed it with technology, with volunteers, with sheer determination. In doing so, she's created a blueprint for how youth-led movements can leverage digital tools to create massive change without massive budgets. Beyond activism, building a business, Sophia's story doesn't stop with activism. In 2025, she co-founded Phia, an AI-powered fashion tech platform that simplifies sustainable shopping. Together with co-founder Phoebe Gates, she built a tool that aggregates secondhand and retail fashion options, making smarter, eco-friendly shopping easier for millions. They also launched a podcast, The Burnouts, sharing the realities of startup life, ambition, and resilience. So, where does Sophia Kianni go from here? As of this recording, she's still in her early 20s, still studying, still building Climate Cardinals, still pushing for a world where climate information isn't a privilege reserved for English speakers. Sophia's best work likely hasn't been done yet. Her biggest impact might still be ahead. But here's what we know for certain. A teenage girl from Virginia, inspired by her Iranian grandmother, saw a problem everyone else had missed. And instead of waiting for someone else to fix it, she built the solution herself. She proved that you don't have to wait until you're older, more experienced, or more credentialed to change the world. You just need to see a problem clearly and have the courage to act. Sophia Kianni didn't ask for permission to become a climate leader. She didn't wait for an invitation to the table. She built her own table, invited thousands of young people to join her, and changed the conversation forever. That grandmother in Tehran, she can finally understand the climate crisis in her own language. And millions of other people around the world can too. All because one teenager decided that language shouldn't be a barrier to climate action.